I try to pick the pieces in my mind, put them in a pretty little line for you to see. I try.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Dear DM, a Dungeons & Dragons advice podcast where each episode I'll be sitting down with a different dungeon master in order to discuss, debate, and hopefully answer your D&D related questions. This week is a very special episode, but before we begin, I want to thank all you lovely people for tuning in and listening, and especially I want to thank everyone who submitted questions for this episode. As always, if you want to hear your question answered on a future episode, please send them to us in an email to deardm.submit@gmail.com or tweet it to us on Twitter at DearDMPodcast. The more questions we get, the more content we can make for all you lovely folks, and the happier I'll be. So, we're doing things a bit different this week, as my guest is not only an experienced DM and writer for several D&D projects, he also happens to be my older brother, Jeff. That being the case, I was actually able to sit down with Jeff face to face, which was lovely, but unfortunately, since my recording setup isn't usually used for multiple people, this episode isn't going to be the crystal clear audio you're used to in the program. I cleaned it up as much as I could to make it listenable, but the mic got bumped a couple times, so apologies in advance. Despite technical issues, I hope that you enjoy the episode. Lord knows we had fun recording it. All right, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Joe. It's really nice to be here.
Yeah, normally, I have on someone who I either know personally through D&D or, someone who contacted me or something to that effect. But not only are you my brother, which makes this very easy to arrange, but you're also a writer.
Yes.
For D&D products.
Sort of. I write for Pathfinder, which is sort of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5... Bastard Child, based on the 3.5 rules with some adjustments.
Awesome. And you specifically, you've done a lot of work with the Spheres of Power system, right?
Yes. Spheres of Power is a product by Drop Dead Studios, and the idea is to recreate the magic system so that it's more friendly to working with party members who don't have magic available. So that it's easy for new people to understand, and so that you can make any concept work at any level. So a big problem for me is that if I want to play a necromancer, I want to start raising zombies at level 1, even if they're weak zombies.
Which the standard system in pretty much all editions, you have to wait until you have access to like 3rd, 4th level spells.
Right. Whereas with Spheres of Power, if you take the Death Sphere, you can raise zombies immediately. They're going to be weak, and they're going to, they're only going to last a few minutes. But you have zombies, and then as you get more powerful, you can learn to raise them for longer periods, make them stronger, raise different kinds of undead, that sort of thing.
And it's interesting because, I actually ended up there was one time where I used Spheres of Power. I was playing a game where it was being used well before you ever, started writing for it. So it was interesting to hear that you had started doing that, but... yeah, that's awesome. So for those of you at home, just a little insight. So far, pretty much every person that has been on the show so far, I've had a similar mentality and style of DMing for, but we're kind of diametrically opposed in a lot of ways, which is good, which means we're going to get some opinions we don't usually get on the show.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah. I don't think that we disagree as much as you think we do, but... we definitely do have our differences.
Primarily being, I'm mostly into it for the role-playing, the fluff, and everything, and you like a lot more numbers and crunch than I do.
I do. I've always been a bit of a rules guy.
Which is totally legitimate, even though it's wrong in every way. But, no, that's fine. But do you want to just start jumping in and answering some questions?
Sure, we can do that.
All right. Our first question is going to be very pertinent because, with your expertise. Old School Cool asks, I've recently started D&D 5e with a new group of friends, and now that our first couple of one-shots are finished, everyone wants me to run a game since I'm by far the most experienced player in this group, and our DM doesn't have time to run a full campaign. The only issue is that I am far more familiar with 3.5 and 4th edition than I am with 5e. how can I try to convince my friends to give an earlier edition a shot? Or should I just bite the bullet and learn to run 5e?
Okay, so I'm a little bit torn on this. I am a little bit biased towards 3.5e, and I have more experience with that too. And I see the appeal of wanting to run the thing that you're familiar with. On the other hand, it sounds like your players are not anywhere near as experienced as you. And the thing that I do like about 5e is that it is much easier to just jump right into. It doesn't have all the fiddly bits. It doesn't have all the separate rules for, you want to do this, you want to do this. It's a much more compact rule system. So as with a lot of game topics, I suggest that you talk to your players and see what they want out of the game, because what 3.5 Pathfinder offer for you and your players is different from what 5e offers.
And yeah, that is a big thing. Like, that's pretty much the golden rule here on Dear DM is talk to your players, talk to your DM. That solves 90% of problems. But yeah, I agree that like 5e has taken off so much because it is such a good entry point. That's why it has like D&D is bigger than it really ever has been because of that. And it's one thing, but if, say, he really did want to just run 3.5 or, Pathfinder or an earlier edition, what would you say are some of the things he could say to the new party to try and tell them, if they had concerns about the older editions being more complicated, which they kind of are, what are some things that they could say that are benefits that 5e doesn't have?
Well, first of all, there's a lot more character space that you can play in. So, especially if you branch off into Pathfinder, which honestly I would suggest doing anyway. Some of the rules are a little bit simpler. A lot of them have been rebalanced, so there's not as much of a power disparity between people who whack things with swords and people who cast spells. But there's also a lot more content. So, you want to be someone who casts spells all the time, but you don't want to cast them from a spell book. You want to be sort of a natural spellcaster. You could be a druid, but you could also be a witch. Say you want to do magic, but you want your magic to be like you're mixing chemicals and things. You're an alchemist. You can be an alchemist. And so there's things that are much easier to do that way in Pathfinder 3.5. The other thing that is beneficial for 3.5, I think, is that there's actions available to the characters that are built into the system more than it is in 5e. So it's much easier to make a character who specializes in fighting dirty, or a character who specializes in tripping, things like that.
Awesome. Yeah, it does offer a lot of... That's the one thing that is both awesome and terrifying for me about 3.5 Pathfinder, is that there are so many options that sometimes it's almost too many. But for those who like yourself, or plenty of other people who really like to dive into the crunch, that's going to be their bread and butter.
Right. And if you have new people, there are definitely simple things to play. Like a fighter in Pathfinder is, it's not my favorite class, but it works. There's, you get feats frequently, so you can specialize in something, and then you get some abilities with armor and weapons that make you better at it than most people. You want to play a rogue, you have sneak attack, and then you have some talents that you pick every. There are simple classes that you don't have to learn the grapple rules, the trip rules, all that. Don't
remind me. The grapple rules give me PTSD.
Yeah, don't grapple. They're a mess. I've never played in 5e, but
it's literally contested athletics checks.
Okay, so in 5e it works. Any other edition, including 4th edition, it just does not work.
There's even a fun grappler feat that lets you pin and grapple larger enemies, which is it's 5e is the first game in which I've seen someone successfully create a professional wrestler character and actually have it be fun.
Though I will say, if you really want to have a wrestler, check out Drop Dead Studios' Spheres of Might. Sorry, another plug.
That's fine.
It is a fantastic product that allows a whole bunch of different fighting styles that core Pathfinder rules don't allow.
Awesome. So for our next question, it's something along the lines of more almost like tradition, because like the question is, I've realized that in pretty much every game I'm in, we almost always end up finding a bag of holding, and it's kind of become a staple for an established party. What other items do you consider a must-have for any respectable party? What items get overlooked? And that's from Grayman 92. Grayman 92, potentially.
Okay, so the first thing is a magic weapon. I'm not sure how it is in 5e, but in 3.5 in Pathfinder, there are enemies you simply cannot hurt without a magic weapon. You can't affect ghosts or wraiths without a magic weapon. You can't. There are like dragons have, you know, if you hit them with a regular weapon, it's not going to hurt them very much at all.
Yeah, there is a good amount of enemies in 5e that specifically have resistance to non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and so a fighter or someone who is non-magical kind of gets boned if you do that too early on.
Right. The other thing that all my characters have, especially if they're not actually spellcasters, is teleportation items. Even if they're, teleport 10 feet, that's really handy for, getting out of a situation where, you're a squishy wizard and you're going to get whacked if you cast a spell. Or you're in a grapple and you don't want to deal with the grapple rules, so you just want to teleport out of the grapple. Those sorts of things. Teleportation is really helpful. Flight, because you're eventually going to fight a griffin or a giant eagle or something like that, or a dragon. And if they're just flying above you, breathing fire on you, and you can't fly, and you're not an archer, you're kind of screwed. So you're going to want flight at some point too.
Yeah. So, and the cool thing is a lot of stuff you said, there's multiple options. I mean, obviously there's a dozen different types of magical weapons. For flight, you have winged boots, and then you have wings of flying and cloak of the manta ray, or not manta ray, but cloak of the bat. You have a bunch of different things that can do all that. I do find that there are my favorite ones though aren't even the ones that fill a mechanical niche, but like for example, alchemy jug. That is always important to have just because of the hijinks that come out of it.
Yeah. One of the characters I played while or so ago was an artificer, and she was one of the most talented artificers in Eberron, because we're playing at a high level, and Eberron is not a high level world. And I convinced my DM to let me make a bunch of magic items that just had no mechanical use, and I didn't have to pay the gold for them or anything, but like I had a little tin soldier that if you played the national anthem, it would march up and down and salute you. And she had a closet that pressed and cleaned her dresses for her, and
just the flavor of those was more important.
Right, because she's supposed to be a person. She's a tinkerer. She builds things. That's her raison d'etre, and so she has all these useful magical items that she has around her house, but doesn't use in adventure.
I will say this also should extend to non-magical items, because something I will never leave the starting in without are grappling hook, extra rope. I don't give a damn if you start with rope, you need extra rope. Caltrops.
Yes, caltrops are always useful.
Wedding stone is surprisingly useful in 5e.
Oh yeah, it's useful in Pathfinder too.
Yeah. And ale in general, if you can. I feel like 90% of D&D characters are alcoholics one way or another. Now that we've answered that question, do we want to get to the fun bit of making some new characters?
Sure, we can do that.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, each episode we roll some dice. I have some random character tables, and we just take the concepts that come out of it, see what we like best, and you guys make something fun out of it. We actually did have, Travis Mattingly make some wonderful art for last episode, which was the archaeologist elf who never follows directions.
That seems dangerous.
Oh yeah, the comic is lovely. Yeah, he made a comic out of it. It was freaking perfect. But Here's hoping we can make something equally entertaining. Let me go grab my dice. All right. So the first roll, as always, is going to be for the race of our first character.
2.
2 is half elf.
All right. And 4.
4 is going to be a ranger. Okay,
All right.
nothing
A little bit
groundbreaking.
stereotypical there, but
But
8.
8 is hermit. Okay, this is going to be boring until we get the character quirk.
All right, let's see. What do we have? We have a 15.
A 15 is tone deaf, but loves to sing loudly.
Well, I mean, that fits with the hermit. That's why he's a hermit.
I mean, yeah, that does make sense. That would be why he's ostracized. But, all right, that's the first concept. Let's go ahead and jump to the next one.
All right. Race. 18.
That's going to be a lizard folk. Let's check the profession.
4.
That's another ranger.
Jeez, this is a weird die. 9.
9 is going to be a knight. So this one's a little bit more interesting.
Okay.
Some sort of order of lizard folk.
10. What's his quirk?
10 is frequently makes double entendres or Freudian slips, but is never aware of it.
Oh.
That's
Okay.
some sort of... Okay, I'm imagining some sort of lizard folk who has somehow become like a nobleman knight, but hasn't quite gotten the grasp of the language of common, and just ends up constantly saying things that are somewhat suggestive.
Yeah.
All right, that works.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. Let's do one more.
All right. Let's see. What do we have here? 14.
14 is kobold.
All right. Kobold's one of those things you either love them or you hate them. 1. Fighter.
Yes, so kobold fighter, very small but fierce.
2.
2 is charlatan.
All right. And what's his quirk? 3.
Insomniac.
Oh dear.
So
Poor kobold.
yeah, seems like this one's had a rough life in
Yeah.
general. I will say, out of the 3, I think I like the idea of the lizard folk knight double entendre.
Yeah. Maybe it's a Princess and the Frog thing, but the disenchantment was like incomplete. So it was a lizard that got turned into a lizard folk and raised to knighthood because he married the princess.
I mean, I guess, but like, isn't the whole point of the Prince of the Frog is that the frog is like intelligent to begin with? So it's like now you're just turning a lizard into a person, which is like a little bit backwards.
True.
But hilarious.
All right. So we're going to have the listeners come up with a better backstory.
That's what they're for. I mean, not the sole purpose, but in this instant. But yeah, so we're going to go with the lizard folk knight ranger, I believe, who is constantly making double entendres and is not aware of it. If you have any submissions for that, if you have any art or cosplay or short bio, anything about that combination of traits, go ahead and send those to either our email at deardm.submit@gmail.com or to us on Twitter at deardmpodcast, and I will be overjoyed to look at whatever we receive. So we should jump back to what we do here, and that is question. So our next question is going to be, how do you balance saying yes to everything? Is it possible to say yes too much? And that's from Ink Dreamer. And I will start out by saying yes.
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 Especially if you're playing with my players.
Yes.
Sorry, guys, if you're listening, but one of my players, I don't think I said yes too much, but I said yes to a lot of things. He's playing a pixie time mage who's obsessed with glitter and owns a town. And she takes taxes in jam and homemade arts and crafts.
All right.
So yeah, I said yes a lot. But there's some things about his character that I said no.
Because that's what I was going to say, is that I think this addresses an issue that it's kind of something that a lot of newer DMs and players feel that, because it is an important, say yes is like the foundation of improv, and a lot of D&D is improv. It's the foundation of going with something rather than shutting something down, and as a DM, that is a big part. However, I feel as though it may have gotten to the point where people take that as such a cardinal rule that, like Ink Dreamer is dealing with, that they worry about saying no at all.
Right. And, I think it's also going to depend on the world that you're playing in. I usually run games in not my own world. I'm running one game in Ravenloft, and I'm running another game in Eberron. And, I'm not going to say yes to things that mess up the setting. Like, there's no guns in Eberron. So no, you can't play a gunslinger.
If the gunslinger said that they had invented the gun, or if that was their backstory,
that might be okay. But like if he's descended from a line of master gunsmiths, that's no. And if the character is going to be disruptive to the party, that's a no too. I no serial killers in my party. And there are hard things that just triggers for some people that you can't do in characters, or it will make other people not have fun.
And I feel like it's come up a lot, but a lot of that stuff has to be addressed in Session Zero. That's always part of my Session Zero, is asking players, is there anything that you would be extremely uncomfortable with if a theme came up? Is there anything that is absolutely a no-go under any circumstances? And I always encourage players to come to me with those kind of things so that everyone's comfortable.
Yeah.
But you always have to be prepared to say no to something that is going to ruin the fun for the other players.
Right.
I just wanted to address that because that is a couple people asked a similar question, and I wanted to dispel the myth that you always have to feel like you say yes. You are the god of the world for a reason. The god doesn't just go with everything.
Well, one of my favorite supplemental rules is called Speak Authoritatively. And it's especially useful in worlds that, sort of have a bit of openness to it, like, your own homebrew world that isn't, completely gelled yet. And basically what it is you allow the character to say, this is true. Like, there's a town 10 miles north of you. And then you decide, is this like a common knowledge thing? Is this a secret? Is it a super secret? Is it something that no one should, be able to know without years of research? And that's the DC for their knowledge check. And the DM rolls a knowledge check in secret. And if they succeed, then it's true. And you tell them, okay, it's true. If they fail by a little bit, you say, no, it's not true. If they fail by a lot, you say, yeah, it's true, but it's not. And so that allows you to say yes to some things, but also have a little bit of, playing with your players.
That's cool. I'm usually because I go more for the storytelling and I usually in my settings things like that are going to be concrete, but that would definitely be fun for a game that like a lot of different kind of players might enjoy, where things are like truly open world, like. Because that's one thing I don't do too often is I rarely do true sandbox. Like, you always want to have sandbox elements, but I rarely do, okay, you're in this world, what do you want to do?
Well, and it's also going to depend on what game you're playing. And I know this is mostly a Dungeons & Dragons podcast, but one of the systems I really like is the Dresden Files system, which is based on Fate. And in Fate, there's a lot more looseness in the roles of the Dungeon Master and the players. So the players can decide things about the story and about the world. And the first session, the Session Zero of the Dresden Files RPG is you make your characters, but you also make the city that you're playing. And the DM and the players work together to decide the different aspects of the city, the different locations, the themes of the city. So, is this, gritty Chicago with crime? Or are you in Portland, which is quirky and has, cabals of witches that may or may not be doing real magic? They might be just college students playing around. So
okay, yeah,
it's going to depend on what system you're playing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, for the most part, we're system agnostic. For like mostly, we just call it Dear DM rather than Dear GM because of alliteration, which is neat. But yeah, no. I've only played a little bit of Fate, but it's one of those things where it's just like it doesn't feel quite right for me. Even though I'm normally like all about the roleplay, I feel as though I think because my roleplay is more about storytelling than it is about just playing a role. it feels weird to have the world be so flexible, because a lot of time with storytelling, it relies on a concrete world.
Right. I do recommend trying out different systems. Even if that you decide they're not for you, you can bring in elements or styles from those to the game that you actually like. It's
like being a musician. Like, no rock musician has ever gotten worse by also studying jazz.
Right.
It's even if you don't play jazz as your main genre, you still can carry a ton of that over to playing rock, or vice versa, or anything like that.
And punk musicians are generally better if they've studied classical music.
Yep.
So
so for the last question, it's going to be from Aesel, who asks, what is the best way of handling munchkins? And in this case, I believe munchkin is referring to a player who is like overly concerned with winning D&D, essentially, right?
Yeah. So first thing to do with munchkins is say no to having them in your party, which is not always possible, obviously, because a lot of games are between friends. So my general rule is deal with in-character things in the game. If a character does something stupid, the consequence is something bad happens to them. But you deal with out-of-character problems out of the game. And munchkinry is an out-of-game problem. It is a player and their style being disruptive to the party. So I think the first thing to do is to talk to the other players about it and ask them if it's bothering them. Some people don't care if one person is monopolizing the combat because they're more interested in the social aspects or the exploring or whatever, and they'll just take a little break, not focus on the combat, let the person swing the sword, the munchkin swing the swords and kill the bad guys, and while they drink beer and occasionally sing a song as their bard. But some people are going to be bothered because they wanted to do combat and the munchkin is winning every combat. And some munchkins are also going to be disruptive in terms of if you say no to them, they're going to be upset. So the next step, if you decide that it actually is a problem, if you after talking to your other players, is to take the munchkin aside and explain what the problem is. And I recommend this for a lot of things in general life, but look up nonviolent communication. And it is a way of expressing problems without blaming.
Is it essentially the adult real world version of an iMessage?
An iMessage?
Did they not do that to your generation?
No.
We always had to do iMessages in elementary school, which is where you had to address the person you were upset with and say, I am upset when you do this.
Yes.
You make me feel, which was great, except for they made you do it for stuff like someone punching you in the face, and it doesn't work for that.
Yeah, no, it does not work for that. But for, somebody just, making things not fun, it works really well. It helps to, tone down the emotions, make it so that they are able to be not defensive about it, so that they don't feel like you're blaming them for making D&D not fun. You're just explaining that, we need to work out a solution. And maybe that solution is, they tone down their character. Maybe that solution is, they optimize their character to the hilt, but they optimize for something other than combat, something that's not going to disrupt the game.
Well, it's interesting because it's almost the other primary difference between the way you play and the way I play, beyond the basics of I enjoy more rule of cool and like less. I try to not deal with numbers if I don't have to. Is that you play primarily by play by post. You usually do it on forums in some form or to that extent. Which
Discord works really well too.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I think with play by post, it has a different almost like effect in terms of people, because if someone monopolizes on play by post, I imagine the only effect is that they're kind of like have a super long post that you have to read. Versus in real life, when you have a 4-hour session, you have a player who's taking up half an hour of their own time.
Right. And also, to some extent, the really long posts are some of the best because Whereas the when you're playing in real life, it's improv. With Play by Post, it's really more collaborative fiction writing. And so the longer the posts, that means that there's more description in there, more, action or more inner emotions, which is always good. And so the problem with Munchkins in Play by Post is that they're going to be,
less descriptive. They're going to be
right. They're going to be saying, "I whack them for 200 damage,"
which isn't interesting for fiction.
Yeah, no, it's just not fun. And so so it is a bit different, but
the same thing still applies, though. It's that core rule of, like you said, if it's an in-game problem, if it's an in-character problem, deal with it in-world. If it's an out-of-character problem, which Munchkinning is, deal with it out of character.
The other is that if you're like me and you have a little bit of Munchkin in you, really pay attention to what other people are playing. I recently joined a game and the party needed a healer, so yeah, I'll play a Vitalist, which is a psionic healer, powers of the mind as opposed to powers from the gods. And nobody else is super powerful. I'm not going to optimize all that much, so I'm going to spend half my feats getting a dog that is intelligent. And that's not particularly helpful. He is really good at stealing things because he spent his life trying to steal food from the table, but he's not disruptive in combat. He's not overshadowing the fighters or anything. So if you have a little bit of Munchkin in you, work to optimize something other than damage.
Yeah. Well, and it's also interesting because I myself, I'm a little bit of an anti-Munchkin. I sometimes purposefully make my characters worse. Primarily because I think a lot of it was I was inspired, as a lot of people were watching Critical Role. I was inspired by Travis Willingham, who plays the Barbarian, who he's an incredibly intelligent man, incredibly charismatic, but he's playing with a 6 intelligence. And he found a way to make that character not only interesting and hilarious, but also like a 3-dimensional awesome character playing to his faults. And I feel like it's just the tendency for a lot of people is if they have that dump stat or 1 or 2 dump stats like that, then they just try to ignore it. They're like, if they have like 6 charisma or 6 intelligence, they're like, well, then I'll let everyone else handle the smart stuff or handle the conversation, which is the opposite of what you should do. You should be like, my character is too dumb to not fuck this up.
Right.
Yeah, no, I'm very much a proponent of min-minning.
Yeah.
But, so I think that answers that question. I think that's going to be the last question for today. But as always, we like to end the show with a game tale of some sort, something funny or interesting that happened at your table. So what's something short and sweet that we can learn about one of your games?
All right. So my party was sent to stop some cultists who were going to summon an abomination. And we realized that we were so much more powerful than the cultists that we could take them unharmed. We'd just cast a spell and disable all of them. And so that's what we did. We did that and we whisked them off into our airship, saved them from the abomination that they were summoning that was going to eat them, and then saved them from their suicide belts that they had.
Suicide belt?
Yeah, they had explosives strapped to them so that
You just said that so casually. It was almost like the suicide booths in Futurama. I'm like, oh yeah, just Tuesday wearing my suicide belt.
Yeah, but the DM was not particularly happy about this because then now he has to make characters for these NPCs that were supposed to be either eaten or blown up. And in particular, we adopted one of them as basically our pet. And his name is Newsmar, and he now has a character that the DM has to play. So, on the one hand, I want to encourage you not to ever do that to your DM. But on the other hand, I really want to encourage you to do that to your DM because it's hilarious.
Thank you all so much for listening. As we wrap up, I just wanted to, again, remind everyone, please send in your questions and submissions to us. at deardm.submit@gmail.com, as well as on our Twitter account at deardmpodcast. And also, as always, I want to thank my dear friend Paul Parisa for use of his song Whether or Not as our intro or outro music. He's a brilliant musician, and you should all check him out. Finally, we also would really appreciate it if you share the show with friends or give us a review on iTunes. Hell, leave a comment in the YouTube channel. I try to respond to as much as I can, and the more folks we get listening to the show, the more questions we'll get and the more content we can create. So, thank you again so much for listening. But yeah, that's going to do it for us here on Dear DM today. Before we go, why don't you tell folks about where they can find some of your writing and projects and whatnot?
All right, so I have 2 projects in playtest right now. One is the Auspicians Handbook for Spheres of Power. It's focusing on the Fate Sphere, which is not particularly well named, I don't think, because it's really the magic of things that are not things. Things that require you to believe in them for them to be true. Good and evil, luck, fate, stories. And so it has things like curses and manipulating luck and fate, becoming archetypes of, the lovers, the major arcana from tarot cards. The second one is a new campaign setting by Cobalt Sage's Creation. I've been working with a team of other fantastic writers. We have some new magic items, some new races, different archetypes for those races to use with the different classes. And that one is available at cobaltsages.com. The Auspicians Handbook playtest is available on various forums, which I think I can get you to put in the comments.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and include a link in the description for that. But yeah, go check those out. They're awesome projects. I know from playing Spheres of Power let me play a bard who literally just threw magic potatoes at zombies for a while. So it lets you do fun stuff.
Yeah, and completely new kinds of magic, completely customized magicians.
All right, so that's going to do it for today. I swear one of these days I'll actually come up with a catchphrase to end the podcast with. But for now, we'll just say goodbye. Have a good couple weeks till the next episode, which I believe is happening whatever is 2 Tuesdays from now. Let me look that up real quick.
February something or other.
That would be February 13th is going to be the next episode that goes up. So watch for that then. In the meantime, keep doing what you do. That's not a good one.
No, that's not a good catchphrase.
Well, I swear.
We'll brainstorm.
But anyways, have a good one. Adios, muchacho.
Cheers.
Yeah, that works. It will have faded out at this point.